to the government, and the government will not buy that you didn't earn it as income.
There was a story that came out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, of a guy that had a vehicle sitting in his driveway that was not registered, no plates, no anything. A police officer came by, saw that it wasn't registered, ran the VIN, confirmed that it wasn't registered, left a ticket on his window, even though it was sitting in his driveway, for like $50 or something like that. And the guy refused to pay it. He said, no, screw that. It was sitting in my driveway. They eventually, of course, over time, if you don't pay the ticket, the price keeps going up. It went up to like $500 or $600, $700, something like that. And he still refused to pay it. He said, no, I'm not going to do it. They attached it as a tax onto his income tax. He refused to pay that. I think it was the income tax. Anyway, it ended up where it got so bad where they applied it to his home tax, and he refused to pay it, and they foreclosed on his home. They took his home over a ticket. Whenever I heard this, I nearly fell out of my chair, because this thing is not uncommon. It's happening every day.
A lot of it has to do with the inability or the fear that people have in facing the legal system or attempting to get it on their side.
Yes.
And in my personal experience, I've found that when you approach your county and your county legal structure that way, and the judges, if they know you're working on your own behalf and attempting to stand up to the lawyers, they'll actually cut you some slack and guide you through.
Yes.
And it is not that onerous. And you can get some of these assisting forms and everything printed out for you, all ready to go. You make your substitutions and you file it. See what happens. It costs you the time and energy to do that and to print it off. And it works more often than not. And a lot of these people, for like this fellow with losing his house in foreclosure over the initial fine, there's both the attitude of, well, it's not right, but then if you don't do anything, then you're tacitly accepting the process as it is.
Right.
That's how it starts ballooning, and then you still don't do anything, and it grows and grows. You probably would have been better off standing up and fighting the ticket initially in court.
That's true. That's absolutely true. Here's and we're getting close to the bottom of the hour, so I'm going to squeeze this one in, and we can follow up on it after the break. It says, have you ever heard of Dr. Bobek, who invented the magnetic pulsar blood purifier? And do you find his technology valuable in the future for fighting infections? Any thoughts concerning colloidal silver's effectiveness?
I've never heard of the guy, so I can't comment on the effectiveness of this pulsing of the blood stuff. And colloidal silver is only good, in my opinion, topically. Its effectiveness taken internally is way reduced.
Really? What is it exactly?
Colloidal silver.
Yeah.
Colloidal silver is silver that's been reduced to a nanoparticle that's less than 26 angstroms in size, or 26 picometers, whichever scale you use. And it's silver is an interesting substance because it's a pathogen. It kills almost all kinds of parasites or bacteria or viruses. It has a huge range of effectiveness. I think 600 subspecies of bacteria alone can be killed by it.
Really?
The superbug is killed instantly if you'll use silver-plated handles in your hospital, that kind of thing. So it's tremendous in that regard, but topically. Internally, it has tendency to start binding with cells and not really end up where you need it. So if you had an internal infection in a bone in the foot and you drank the silver water, you might have to drink considerable amounts to get enough to circulate that it would be used down there, because you house so much in the way of bacteria that it gets like used up before it can get there.
I see. I've just been corrected. It's Bob Beck, not Bo Beck.
It still doesn't mean anything to me. It's never anything I've run across.
Okay. All right, we're at the bottom of the hour. I'm going to field more questions when we return, I do promise. And so stay right where you are, everybody. It's Friday night. We're going to be wrapping it up here real soon. So if you want to get your questions in, hop on over to the chat room at ctrnetwork.com and toss them out there. We'll be back right after this.
You're listening to Badlands Radio. And now, once again, your host, Captain Jack.
All right, we're going to be coming to the end here really quick. Wrapping up this Friday night. There is several questions here I still have yet to field over to Clif. Some very interesting ones. You guys out there are some deep thinkers. I absolutely love that. And we're going to jump around a little bit with the questions, but that's not a bad thing. First, let me do this. Let me pull Clif in, back into the program. Welcome back, Clif.
Thank you much.
Here is a question that is, it kind of hits on something that we were talking about earlier in the week here in the studio. It says, do you know how to detoxify heavy metals out of the body with herbs, and or how to remove fluoride from our bodies?
Yeah, fluoride is an interesting substance. If it's actually bonded with the body in the sense of bone and this kind of stuff, then it's awful hard to get it to kick loose. Soft tissues, in terms of, it's one of the main causes for the calcification of the pineal gland, is the introduction of fluoride. It is theoretically possible to get rid of it. There's the chelation. So the answer is yes, I know how to do it. There's basically two approaches. One is harsh on the body, and that's chelation, and that uses a combination of herbs to basically get the body to send all the metals to the alimentary canal, which is the esophagus, through to the anus, and then you get rid of it by excreting it.
Uh-huh.
The other approach, of course, is to instantly stop all the fluoride coming on through. It's less harsh. It takes longer. And it involves an Ayurvedic, and that's A-Y-U-R Vedic, V-E-D-I-C. It's a Hindu style of medicine. And it actually involves stuff like rice bran and oat bran, and it's more effective. And it also strips cholesterol as a side effect. And it helps to regulate blood sugar and other minerals. So there's the rub. You've got to be very careful. If you're going to strip heavy metals from your body, presumably because you've been exposed to chemtrails or something and you're worried about that, you have to make sure that you're replacing those that you really need, the selenium especially and the iron especially, but not too much, and so on. So it's a very delicate sort of thing. You need to do some research, but it is doable.
Yes. I know that the fluoride thing, as a matter of fact, here where I live is really close to a lake, and when the lake reaches a certain level, they start requiring everybody to boil their water and different things like this. But where I am on this side of the lake, it's a water tower. It comes from the water company, and they put out a release recently and kind of warned everybody about drinking the water from their system. Something about there was more, they put in more fluoride than they expected, and there was a whole write-up about rat poison and fluoride being in this. It was really disturbing actually whenever you look at it, because fluoride is used in rat poison, isn't it?
Yes, it's a constituent in a number of brain and blood affecting substances. So it's also a part of the process of making a number of the antidepressants, and fluoride's also been associated with depression. It's a nasty substance. They sold it to us. It's sold as stannous fluoride, which is a side element or a waste product from the steel industry.
Yes.
But I think it was actually part of a process that was brought in to curtail the ability of humans to reach into their pineal gland because of the information and the power that's provided by that. And this is one of their mechanisms, is the introduction of fluoride. And if they can't get you to do that, then they'll try and alter the food body that you're getting, and so that your body goes a little wacko, and they can start getting you on various different drugs that will do the same effect.
Yes. Didn't they use this? Didn't they use fluoride as a key ingredient for the population, as a form of kind of dumbing down the population in a sense?
In conjunction with aluminum, correct.
Yes.
And it makes it was used or at least experimented with in the 50s and 60s, and theoretically allows for a more controllable or a suggestible population as well.
Huh.
And then, of course, now we find out that there's 110 parts per million gallium in the air in Phoenix from the chemtrails, and in the one sample there was 2,400 parts per million of aluminum. And aluminum's been associated with Alzheimer's and so on.
Right.
The problem is that aluminum is not a heavy metal. Most of the chelation approaches don't work with aluminum. It bonds in the body in a different way.
Huh. Actually, I wanted to throw this in here real quick because before I forget, and I've already forgotten several times here tonight, there was an experiment that was done with these robots. It was almost like small ants. They were kind of set out and designated to kind of break off in groups of 5 to search for a resource that would refuel them and re-energize them. And whenever one robot in the group of 5 would locate one of these resources, it would turn on a light and would beacon the rest of the robots in to participate in that resource that was found.
Sure, sounds like honeybees.
Yeah, and what would happen was the initial robot that would find the resource would eventually be pushed out by all the rest of them coming in. And as the experiment continued, they saw something that they didn't expect. Robots would find a resource and not turn on their light and beacon us. They did. They started to lie. And it was a fascinating little experiment, and it was something they totally didn't expect, that these robots, in a sense, in working in a collaboration with other robots, whenever it came down to push comes to shove or the strongest survives, they learned to lie.
Right, but, it's an interesting kind of a finding, but as a software engineer, I have to come back and say, well, I don't really buy that, because inherently within the robotic behavior are the constraints that are defined by the firmware and the software.
Mm-hmm.
So it should have been possible to look at the software and say, look, there's a predisposition in your heuristics here, the rules by which the robots weight fuzzy logic that would cause them to, develop what's known as greedy or resource-seeking behavior.
Right.
So it's quasi-interesting, but we don't really have artificial intelligence in computing just yet. That is to say, where computers are generating thoughts or processes beyond the software that or constraints of the original system that they were involved with.
Yes.
But it is nonetheless an interesting phenomenon that those kinds of I guess you want to say limitations are built into the systems that humans engineer here.
Right. Because we've all heard about the term the ghost in the machine, these funny little things that software or computer technology does that is a complete anomaly and a fluke, in a sense, where they have no explanation to it, the ghost in the machine.
Well, there's two actually, again, from my viewpoint in decades of doing this, there's actually two kinds of ghosts. There's a kind of ghost that exists because of bloatware, where you've got all this code that held over from a previous generation is not even really used anymore, but you don't have the time or wherewithal to go through and clean it up and make your code small and tight.
Yeah.
And so it is possible, theoretically, because the code loads in RAM, the conditions could exist that would somehow kick over the processing into some of these orphaned or stubbed out areas of code.
Yeah.
And that's one level of ghost, these strange behaviors. There's another kind of ghost that I wrote about in the, I want to say early 80s, in a series of articles for a German SQL Server magazine that are quite fascinating. And this is a true ghost because it doesn't depend on the constraints of the software, but you get these large SQL Server databases that are used by multiple users at the same time. And if you happen to get a sequence of events, or you can get a sequence of events that occur where a record will be shifted out by one guy in the process of deleting it, say, just in the same millisecond that someone else took a copy of it. So fellow A goes off and he takes record A to delete it, and he deletes it, and fine, his job's done. And only he doesn't know that fellow B has copy of that same record A, and he puts it back. And so the fellow A comes back after lunch and finds that record is B. And